Okay, so you want the next slide?
Yep.
There you go.
All right. Thank you all for having me. I am Jacob Martin. I am the head of horticulture at Mercer Botanic Gardens. I also run the greenhouses there. My job is to grow hundreds of different species of plants from seed every single year, not just cacti. I grow tropicals, natives, epiphytes, ferns from spore, you name it. We try absolutely everything. And then I also run Old School Produce, which is a neat little nursery right over in the Heights, and we also have a beautiful garden venue if you're ever looking for a neat garden to have a party at. And this is just a nice little glimpse of some of the seed work that we do throughout the garden. So we're going to start with kind of the who, what, when, where, why, right? Why grow from seed? You know, sometimes there are certain species that don't pop, and the only way you can get the species is if you grow it from seed. So this is like the best way to grow. The plants acclimate better to our area. Sometimes when you bring in a plant from Arizona or California or somewhere else where it's drier, it just never can acclimate and adapt to the weather in Houston. But when we grow them from seed, we tend to have much better success, and the plants tolerate our fluctuating conditions from very humid to very hot to terribly hot nights. And you feel a little more connected to the plant when you grow from seed. When you've been watching something grow for 3 years as a little baby, you love it so much and you're so happy to see it every day and you take good care of it. But it is also a double-edged sword because when it dies, you feel absolutely heartbroken that you've been taking care of something for 3 years and you watered it too much one weekend. And one of my favorite things about growing from seed, I love to grow hundreds and hundreds of it because occasionally I will get some neat little mutant. And so we grew hundreds of this sparrow cactus, and what do you know? We got a little bitty variegated sport on the side. We'll tend to select those out. Sometimes they die, sometimes they don't, but it's just a great way to get neat mutants. Okay. Where your seeds come from actually really matters. So we don't realize that we are selecting for characteristics that make our life easier by picking seeds from plants that have been growing in greenhouses their whole life. We're not realizing that like these plants we are pulling from are more water tolerant, they tolerate higher humidity, and before we realize that we selected for those traits, and it's a lot further from where it originated from. So we're helping ourselves a little bit, but we're also can be counteractive. And then one thing that I've learned the hard way is when we go out and we collect wild seed and we bring them back and we grow them out in the greenhouses, the wild seed we had to really be more careful with and cut back on the moisture levels. They've been adapted to be extra arid versus the ones from greenhouse grown have been able to handle that little more moisture. So you got to know little tricks like that when you're bringing in wild material. And then there's just a little baby friendly. If anyone has one, they know that they just constantly fall seeds off every other day. And so here's a neat thing that we learned with other seeds. So have you ever grown a pot of seeds and then, 4 months later, all of a sudden some other seeds pop up out of the pot, even though you have some beautiful stock plants? What this is, if you would play the long game, these seeds that sprouted later are better adapted for seed banking. So if we were going to select seeds to collect seeds from for seed banking, the later it would be those because those seeds are adapted to be able to handle abuse, dormancy, and all sorts of other conditions. So those would be the ones where we would want to pull from later on in the future instead of those ones that sprouted immediately that they benefit us for our good germination, but it doesn't benefit seed banking. So there's always neat little things in every little trick you try. So we're going to talk about some seeds. I know we get a lot of people asking about shelf life of seeds, so I'll kind of give you some things I've learned and some little tricks. So like the Cactaceae, I like to keep it about 1 to 3 years. I noticed after 3 years, my germination is extremely poor. But if my seeds are fresh as can be, I get incredible, great germination. My ice plant family seeds, I've had stacks of seeds for 5 years sitting in a drawer, neglected, not properly stored, and I've had pretty good success. So a lot of that ice plant family, you can have good success, keep it out of the heat, and but just don't lose them. They just look like a bag of dust. Okay, and all of the sleepy AC, we lump that in with Apocynaceae, kind of our nightshade. 1 to 2 years, all your pseudolithos and milkweed relatives. Plant them sooner than later. There's a thin seed and it'll dry out quicker. It's desert roses, all those, like, let's get them in the ground. They don't have the longest shelf life, or their germination rates will drop dramatically once you pass about a year. And agaves and aloes, the smaller the seed, the quicker it'll dry up. Agaves, they can sit in the most brutal, terrible weather and sprout every single time. And a lot of the Haworthias and those thin seeds, I try to get them in as soon as possible, or they'll dry out. And I found this beautiful picture to show all the different seeds and the different shapes of different cacti, because they're all extremely unique. And seeds is one of the features they use a lot of times with identification purposes too. So where you get your seeds really, really matters. You got to get them from trustworthy sources. You know, Mesa Gardens, Echo is a fantastic person to get seeds from. CSSA, getting them from friends, you know, just trustworthy friends, getting them anywhere you can. I bought plenty of great seeds off of Etsy and eBay, but I kind of have them ranked in the order of where I like to get them. I do buy lots of seeds from Rare Palm Seed, but sometimes I think they shotgun approach you. They'll say they have 10 species, but they're just going to send you the same species for all 10. And it's the problem is, like, you wait 3 years for the plant to become established to find out, hey, I just got hustled. So get your seeds from trustworthy sources. Take your time, ask questions. Usually a lot of people are happy to answer. And sometimes you can just find seeds of national parks or local areas. Or you can collect your own seeds, right? Everyone's collected fruits, all the Puntias or Mammillarias, or these are Pereskia fruits, and even Jatropha seeds. Sometimes we have to catch our own seeds. These seeds are explosive and they'll shoot all over the greenhouse. So we put little net bags on them to catch them, and some of those succulents like that will have explosive seeds. And these beautiful net bags will let air through, but will still catch anything. And then sometimes when you get these nice thick hard seeds on Brescias and the Puntias, you gotta starify and you gotta nick them a little bit. And we'll either use just like 80 grit sandpaper or even a small nail file or a toenail clipper to just clip the edge off of a seed so we can let more water in. So, and y'all like cactus, so it's inevitable that you've gotten one of these sticky fruits and you're like, oh, I'm gonna grow all these seeds. It has so much in it. And you can, absolutely. So it's this mucilaginous layer, this gel-like substance that will be in a fruit of one of our cactus. We got to get it out and we got to store it. So a lot of times we have to remove this kind of gooey substance if we want to store seeds long term. But this lady writes this incredible paper down here, and she decided to like test the germination, whether like, let's leave the mucilagenic layer on and let's clean them perfectly and see which ones sprout better. And which one do you guys think sprouted better? No, the clean ones did not sprout better. The natural mucilagenic layer kind of acted like a little barrier that helped send water and nutrients through the micropyle of seed. And I'll show you guys a little micropyle. It really shocked me too. I would have thought cleaning was better. But the little micropyle, go to the next slide, it's just this little like chamber here that helps allow nutrient and water flow to get to the interior of the seed, and that mucilagenic layer kind of helps let that water transfer easier. And it makes sense, you know, it's a terrible place in the desert. Let's have little any advantage we can to help germination. So we got these terrible sticky seeds, and we need to clean them, and then we want to plant, right? So I had tried every possible way to clean seeds, have manual labor of volunteers squeeze them, and then we at the end now, we just squeeze them onto one of these oil mesh strainers that you would put over frying oil. It's got thin holes, it won't let the seeds through, but it'll tend to let lots of the sticky material through, and we can rub them all over, run the water all over them, and then we can just let it dry right there on the strainer, scrape them up the next day, and they're perfectly fine. It makes it easy instead of like putting them on a paper towel, cleaning the paper towel, and then you just hate yourself and you've lost so many seeds stuck to you and stuck to all your equipment. But sometimes you get these like extra sticky seeds, and this is something I had learned from other species. We'll take these extra sticky seeds and we'll put them in some water, and we add a little bit of Dawn in there, and then you you spit in the cup. I know this sounds gross and weird, but all those bacteria, the enzymes in your mouth will really help break down that coating really, really well. And if you can let it sit for a day, that's better. And you'll kind of see it start to kind of break down better. But use your own spit, or you can have someone else. But this is our preferred method. And then once you kind of got them, sifted and cleaned out, we'll let them dry. And we store ours in all just clean paper envelopes that we store in a refrigerator. But I'll let y'all see on the next slide, if you wanted to see how they professionally store all sorts of seeds. I got to visit Atlanta Botanic Garden, and they took me behind the scenes where they show you how they store their seeds for long-term storage. And they makes it seem like it's this crazy complex process, but it's actually very simple. They store them room temperature, they let them sit out, so their humidity, relative humidity is about 25-35%. Then they take their seeds, they put them in these little envelopes that's sitting in a plastic cup, and they set them in these solutions, these saturated salt solutions, this potassium acetate, and then they just set them in there and they close the lid. And what it does is this solution sucks all the moisture out of anything inside this jar to an exact amount of humidity or dryness that they want. And so they can get it exactly by the more solution they have, the drier they make the seeds. So they have it to the T now, and they can get the moisture level exactly where they want before they store them. And then all they do, they just seal them closed and put them away. Nothing special at all. All right, but don't save your seeds. It takes forever. It takes like a year for your plant to become a little bitty plant. So start now, because it's a game of patience. So one of my biggest steps that I try to beat into people whenever they're doing any kind of seed production, whether it's cacti or succulents, the only ones sometimes that don't sprout are sowed or lithops, because it can just be really difficult to separate them. But I always sow my seeds overnight. Almost every seed needs to be rehydrated. If you bought the seed, it's definitely dried out. The only times they don't need to be rehydrated if it was picked that day and planted the same day. But most of the time we sow all of our seeds overnight. We avoid city water whenever possible. We just use bottled water. I'll use rainwater. For the most part, we just use drinking water bottles because we have them laying around. And sometimes for really hard seeds, a lot of like hibiscus or some of those like Baja relatives of those really hot, dry, succulent trees, we'll actually like take boiling water and we pour the boiling water right over the seed as soon as it's done. And then we let it sit in that warm water overnight, and I'll get really much better germination. And if you want to take it one more further, when you pour that boiling water and you have it sitting in that cup, you set that cup on a heating mat, and it keeps that water really nice and warm. It really helps break those seed coats. It really helps the water get in. So soaking your seeds overnight is the most important step. All right, stratification. Luckily for us, we don't have to do it very often. Sometimes capipoas, they require some cold stratification, but I would look at your seeds specifically to find out if you need to do it. It's a very simple process. We take bank mud, sometimes they use sand. You get it so that just a drop of water squeezes out of it. You don't want it too dry. I tell people it should look like chunky peanut butter, not smooth peanut butter. And you put your seeds in there and let them sit for any amount of recommended time. So usually it's 30 days, sometimes it's 90 days. And then we just throw it in the fridge and we leave it until, and you always write your ready date on it because you'll never remember when you're supposed to pull it out. For large seeds, we'll tend to do like warm stratification, and we'll just take bags of perlite, big Ziploc bags, with perlite slightly damp the same way with 1 or 2 drops of moisture. And we set these large seeds in there, baobabs, hibiscus, pseudobomba, some of these larger seeds, and we just put them in the bag, we blow it up with air, and then we set it on the corner and we forget about it. And it's like sitting in like a fluffy pillow, and it'll slowly start to sprout right then and there. And then you can slowly prick them out one by one, versus like you put these in, half your seeds rot, you want to dig in there constantly and see if they sprouted, and you cause more problems than good. And versus these large ones, this is a fantastic, easy way. And the trick we've learned is you want to actually have this little radical out. If you just see it splitting like this, and it's just maybe got one little tiny shoot on it, give it some more time. Because when you pull it out, you want it to kind of have a little bit stronger root system so it can handle that transplant better. We've noticed when we pull them out, if that root system isn't strong enough, the humidity changes too much for it, and it'll usually dampen off, or the tip will die. So this is one we learned the hard way. Make really good labels. My volunteer brought me some cactus seeds, and I was like, "You know the name of it?" Yeah, they're sticky. And so like I come back later and it says like cactus sticky seeds. Like so, make really good labels for your seeds now and make sure they last, because this label's gotta last a year usually. All right, so we're going to go into containers a little bit. Everybody has their own kind of favorite method or favorite container. I'm going to go by my favorites, and I'm going to give you guys some other little beginner favorites. I love sterile pots or brand new 4 or 6-inch pots. That's my main method for everything. I buy them by the case, so I always have a couple fresh new ones in there. But if you're going to reuse pots, it can't have any little flake of dirt or anything in there, because that's where all your problems are going to start. Another option is microwave safe containers. We all use takeout containers all the time. They're fantastic, and I've started plenty of seeds inside them. But a couple things I've learned is fill that soil up about as high as you can, because it's going to settle significantly, and then your little seedlings only have like a 1/4 inch of soil to go in. So prepare for that soil to settle on it. And I'm always choosing things with lids, and preferably ones that I can throw in the microwave. I don't cut holes in the bottom of mine. I know there's mixed results on people doing it, and I've learned it from people that did a lot of ferns and spores. But as I said, when you're cutting those holes in the bottom, that's exactly where your pathogens are coming in. Your tables aren't clean that you're setting this on, and it's just inevitable that they're going to work in. And it was just something we kept having similar issues, and they troubleshooted, and it was exactly us cutting holes in the bottom. You have to be a little more picky on your watering, but it'll save it better to keep this kind of nice contained sterile area. So these seedlings all need high humidity when they're first germinating. And so some things you can do to help out are the humidity domes. Plastic wrap is a fantastic one we use all the time. And then one that I learned from another garden is these clear salad bowls that you'll see in the next container. Then I'll take my pots and I'll set them inside there to keep that humidity high. And it was awesome to get to go to this greenhouse facility, and they had like hundreds of these racks with all these bowls on them, and every single one's a different species. And they just slowly kind of work their way up from a tiny container to the big bowls. And it's just the idea of like, you can use these as fantastic little humidity domes to keep a good eye on, to mist in easily, and you can slowly crack the dome a little bit more and more and more. So medias are, I say, a personal preference, because you have to pick the media for the type of waterer you are. Are you a heavy-handed waterer that's out there every day wanting to water for something, or are you just forgetting about it and walking away and you're hoping your stuff's sprouted? I'm on the heavy-handed, so I tend to use a little more perlite in my mix. My preferred mix, we have tried everything under the sun you could think of for different germination medias, and we settle on a nice light peat moss mix that has a little perlite, and I'll add a little more perlite in it to just give me a little bit better drainage. I like my seeds to sprout in a fluffy cloud or a baby. I wanted to have this softest thing in the world to grow in, not this rock hard media. But that's just my personal method. And then I learned something from another grower I got to visit, and I kept having something we call caking. You ever grown a plant or a seed pod, and it starts to flare up at the top, and you get this layer where like the top of your seeds are dry, but below it's wet, and you can't figure it out. And she told me if you add little sprinkles of vermiculite on top of your pots, it prevents that caking from ever occurring, and it doesn't hurt any of your seeds too. So a lot of times now, we'll take our seeds, and then for our top dressing, we add a tiny little bit of vermiculite, and it completely eliminated all that caking. One fact, just a little more I go.
Oh, sorry.
I love to tamp in my soil lightly before I put my seeds out, because even germination is one of the most important things ever. Seeds will out-compete other ones. They'll fall below before you need them. But just keeping everything even for germination is extremely helpful in the long run. And then don't be afraid to like sift your soil, because some of these seeds are dust almost. And we have every type of sifter and strainer we can possibly use. And I'll put the thicker soils in the bottom, but as I get towards the top, I'll sift it and get those nice, fine, light soils for some of these tiny seeds. Some seeds, do like gravel medias. Some people want to water more often, so they'll use like a really rocky media so they can water every day. I've tried it. I'm not a fan of it only because like sometimes the seed will sprout and it just can't quite penetrate those gravel medias. They'll sit on top and they'll germinate. They'll become a little seedling and they'll fall over. And they just can't quite get their radicals to push down through into the gravel media. So I'm a little more hesitant on my gravel medias, but I will sift my gravels and I'll have much better results. So this is an example of when we didn't like it. We didn't like this media. We won't do it again. We did get some germination, but I should have a whole lot more. But this is the idea, like you can't get through. I'll layer my gravels, like I would have happily done this as my bottom layer and then work my way up with all these nice lighter sifted layers. So sterilizing media can seem like an extra task, like it's not worth it. But if you're spending big money on seeds, or you only have 5 seeds of a particular species, you don't have like room to lose anything. So taking that extra step to sterilize things makes all the difference in the world. That's why we use those microwave safe containers, and we'll put them inside and make the media just barely damp, not too dry. We crack the lid ever so slightly, and we microwave it for 5 minutes, walk away. Sometimes we'll come back on, microwave it again for another 5 minutes, just to really make sure it's sterile inside that container. Other methods people have used over time is they'll boil water, pour it over the media, and hope that you use the plastic pot, melt your pot. Other options is baking the soil. That's an old-fashioned method that's perfectly fine. There's millions of different recipes online of what people qualify, what temperature it needs to be at. And then there's some people that are very serious and they soak their medias overnight in fungicides. I don't do it just because I don't want to deal with the fungicides that extensively, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it and making sure if you're going to do a large seed planting, you need a ton of good media, it's perfectly fine to prep ahead of time and get it sterile. So some people grow seeds inside, some people grow seeds outside. But if you're going to start your cacti seedling germination, you don't have somewhere like a beautiful greenhouse, you can do them under grow lights. Just try to follow your 12 to 16 hours a day of continuous light and make sure your seedlings are getting some light. I know it just looks like a food container, but I swear there's little seedlings in here if you look close enough. So the most common method, and I feel like even though we've tried everything, if I have a very special plant, a very rare seed, or I only have a couple, I'll use the bag method. Or even just beginners, this is a fantastic method to use for everything. We take a couple 4-inch pots, 2 is my favorite, and we put our sterile media inside it. We've watered it down. We seed our seeds on top of the media. We sprinkle it with our light vermiculite, or we mist it real well. We put it in our bag. We spray it down once a week, zip it up full of air. Once that bag kind of starts to like deflate, that's kind of my sign that I need to open it up, breathe inside it a little bit, blow some fresh air in, close it up, and mist it, start over again. And this is if you're lazy, you don't want to work too much, this is a fantastic method. You're gonna have great success. You can have 50 bags across your kitchen, and they'll all be sprouting. And so after about like 2 to 4 weeks inside that bag, you'll start to see like little bitty seedlings just starting to pop up like this. And that means you're kind of on the right track. And then after about, after that time goes by, about a month or so, you're going to slowly start acclimating your bags. And I'll crack my bag open slightly, let it stay open for an hour or 2, and close it back up. I don't want to open it up immediately, let it sit for overnight or anything. That's way too much of a shock. But you'll slowly just keep acclimating your bag until you're able to leave that bag open, or you'll take that bag and you'll put it upside down, and it'll sit up, but there'll be airflow coming up from the bottom, but it's still providing a little bit extra humidity, because you're just trying to acclimate that plant to our lower humidity. And when I'm starting to acclimate is usually when I'm gonna apply one of my fungicides, because it's been quite a few weeks or months before I put it down. This is just another method of like, when we use the bowls, we would open our bowl and let it acclimate. Usually I don't have that much standing water unless it's germinating, but as soon as they're done germinating, I'm gonna dump that water out and just keep it a little more dry. So once we start to see our true form, 3 months, depending on the plant, we'll start to see our first little hairs coming out. And that means I'm getting closer to pulling my bag completely out. And I'll start to show it, and these will harden off. Usually you're gonna lose a few no matter what when you pull that bag off, just because they're not gonna be able to acclimate, or some of these are gonna be really small versus these big ones are gonna handle it, but these little ones are probably gonna die out. They're just gonna not be able to handle that much lower humidity. And then after about a year, we'll start to get these nice little seedlings here. And these are absolutely at the point where like, I have to transplant them now, or I'm gonna start to see dampening off. This media has reached its lifespan, it's about a year, and you can see where the rot, these are starting to dampen off here. I'm gonna get some more dampening off here. The media is turning green, kind of lets me know it's a little too wet, but this is I gotta move to the next step or I'm gonna lose them. And so the separating seedlings, some can be separated as early as 6 months, some can be a year, some can be way longer. If you grow Areocarpus or Aztecium from seed, like it is a game of patience, a painful game of patience. So other species will grow extremely fast. So it just kind of really depends on which one you're working with. Whenever I'm moving from separating my seedling stage, I'll tend to pull off a lot of this peat soil as much as I can without damaging my roots, because I want to move them to their new media. Because all that happens is like this is going to retain much more moisture and it's going to rot out. So I want to keep my medias as even as possible when I move to my transplant. I'll usually let my transplant sit a day, 2 occasionally, judging on the size of the seedling, but I don't let them sit too long because these are a lot of little delicate roots and it'll dry out much quicker than you think. Fungiciding, I spelled fungiciding wrong, but fungiciding is extremely important on this stat, because this is where I'll usually lose some in this transplant process versus a little bit of fungicide here, you'll get enormous success rate. So open seeding is the method that we mainly use at Mercer. We have nice humid greenhouses, and so we're able to do it. And so we take 4-inch pots filled with regular peat soil, a little bit of perlite, and we wet them all down really well, seed all our seeds directly on top nice and carefully, top dress them with a small amount of perlite, and we just leave them out in the open greenhouse, and we keep them watered very well for probably the first 3 or 4 weeks. We treat them like many other seeds, and then as soon as they start sprouting, then we'll move them over to the cacti section. We'll slowly watch them more, be careful not to overwater them. But keeping things well misted is very, very important if you're doing open seeding. And then, like I said, we'll even keep them in shallow trays of water for the first couple weeks to ensure that media doesn't dry out. Water gently. Sometimes the weekend crew will come in and maybe they're not as gently as I water. And here is like a perfect example of why. Can y'all see what happened? Somehow they watered and splashed the seed into this spot. This is supposed to be local flora. Definitely not. And so we can clearly say like someone was a little heavy-handed and it splashed our seeds over. So gentle mist nozzles, underwatering, underground watering, just anything you can to be as gentle as possible. These are babies. And this was a neat trick that we learned. So sometimes we would grow these seeds and we get good germination and we pick out, and then we would just let the pot dry out. We just let it sit 2 weeks, just bake in the greenhouse, completely neglected, and then we would just start the process entirely over again. Water really well, throw it under the misters, throw it under tables where it gets really, really wet, and then start the germination process, and all of a sudden you get another round of seeds that would germinate in your pot. So if you ever think like, oh, I got zero germination, do this, like let it sit, put it on the shelf, forget about it, and then come back and start it all over again. And we've gotten actually some plants we were for sure like there's nothing. They sold us dead seeds, and then what do you know? They sprouted back up. So this is a great one for most plants, and I've learned it, the hard way, and I've learned it from other growers. Just that a lot of seeds they like to be planted communally. When one seed sprouts, it gives off a small amount of gas, which can trigger another one to sprout, and another one to sprout, and all of a sudden you got 30 seeds giving off a gas. The gas gets much more abundant, and then all of a sudden all your seeds are sprouting. So communal pots, I have much better success with than if I'm individually planting one seed per cell. I can easily divide this later, and I can have 100 plants here versus like a cell tray can hold maybe 72, and it takes up the space of 18 plants. So fungicides are, I think they're very important if you want to get seriously into growing from seed. If you're doing it at home and you just want to grow some out of bags and try little simple ones, you don't have to bother. But if you really want to grow some of these really rare species or difficult plants, you'll need to stay consistent with your applications. There's so many fungicides out there, I can't tell you which ones to use, but just follow the application rates. A lot of them, and we're applying every 14 days, every 30 days. Just depends on what the rate says. But you should also read it because some of the fungicides are actually designed to kill the fungus, but some are only designed to prevent spore germination. So you have to know, or sometimes you can alternate. Like I can use my ones to kill it, but then the next week I'm using my ones to prevent it to stop future problems. So really do your diligence, look into your fungicides, that they can save you or prevent things from going along in the problem, prevent problems in the future. I do use biologics on some seedlings as well, but if you don't use biologics from the beginning, don't bother because they're only a preventive. You can stay ahead of it with your biologics and they'll outcompete the pathogens, but as soon as you lay off and the pathogens become too strong, it's not going to be a cure. So I like the biologics, we use them a lot, but you have to stay consistent. You got to hope that the biologic you're buying isn't 4 months or 4 years expired. So a couple little tricks that, some things to think about. Sometimes we get really, really tricky seeds and we have to use gibberellic acid. This is a natural occurring plant hormone that helps increase germination. It'll help water penetrate the seed coat. Sometimes it'll trigger the seed to start breaking down and encourage the germination. So it's a great product for inducing germinations for really tricky seeds. And some seeds, it's very hard to sprout without it. But like a double-edged sword, you can absolutely overdo it and kill all of your seeds with it. Some of the papers, they'll say around 500 to 1,000 milligrams is their ratio. They're readily available online. Just follow the application rates. And there's plenty of different little methods. Some people soak them in solutions of this. Some people actually take the seed and put a little dot of the gibberellic acid on it. It just depends on the kind of person you are. This one is for those advanced, tricky seeds that you spend a whole lot of money on. You want to make sure you get great germination. And I'll talk to you a little bit about like some of the specific families that I've worked with. The Apocynaceae, Dogbane, Asclepias, Debelias, Pseudolithas. I've had the best success with the bag methods. They like that high humidity in the beginning. I usually get great germination on all of them, but I have to move them out of that media quicker than I would like because I'll usually get dampening off problems sooner than I'd like on those. So just be careful. Use the fungicides if you're doing some of these like really pseudolithos or some of those ones are really tricky in one bad watering. You can lose it. The ice plants, I've had great success with really, really great drainage. So these were, I took lots of little tiny gravels at the top, but if I put all the gravels, like the entire pot of pure small gravel, it just slowly washes out the bottom. And so that was my method of like, I'm gonna use a thicker gravel, then I'm gonna use a medium gravel, and I'm gonna use a very fine gravel at the very top for my germination. These I sterilize absolutely for any kind of lithops. You'll get significantly better germination if you sterilize your medias prior, and I'll communally seed them, mist them regularly, and just be really gentle because a lot of these are so tiny. One water with the hose in the wrong direction, you just beat them all up, and you just ruin months and months of hard work. I avoid clay pots for a lot of my seeds because they'll dry out a little more than I like for a seedling. But just be more careful on temperatures too. You know, a lot of these lithops, I'm not sprouting them in July. Where I'll sprout them inside somewhere it's a little bit cooler. But the biggest thing with these guys, these seeds are so small. Be very, very gentle, and you can lose your crop if you're not careful. Euphorbias, I really wish I could give you guys better procedures for euphorbias. We treat them all like Cactaceae, and we never had too many issues. My bigger issue is I have a hard time finding good seeds of euphorbia. Everyone's selling cuttings, but finding a source of euphorbia can be difficult. But I've had better success when I planted them immediately. And I hate to say it, I usually have the best success when I don't try anything because they're just like popping up in the pots around me, and I just pick them out and plant them like that. So I don't know what it is for these little euphorbias as far as like do less, and you'll have better success. Aloes, agaves, I have very easy. They love the communal planting. My kiss of death is if I divide them too early. I'm a little too eager, and I want to see how many little plants I got. Just have patience. Let them really put on a few of their true leaves. I'll cover them lightly. Germination is usually pretty quick. And my bigger problem is it's too good. I'll have way too many plants sprout, and I'll have 100 plants in that one little pot. And then I'll leave you on one that was really, really tricky. That we tried everything, and we finally got it. So you ever seen the ball mosses that grow in your trees? So there's actually like a really rare one that grows in South Texas. So a lot of people don't know about Lancia baby. So we had these seeds, and we had to figure out how to sprout ball moss, right? And so we tried so many different methods, and so we figured out that if you take a cup that holds water, and we put these mesh screens on it, and then it sits under the mister. So the mister hit it every 20 minutes, but it had the super high humidity just underneath it. That's sitting like 1 inch below that, and that high humidity actually was enough to sprout. And these are all tiny little bitty bromelia ball mosses just beginning to sprout. And me and my sister were ecstatic because we had tried every possible method to get these little tiny tricky plants to sprout. So there's typical things out there, but there's always people out there that are trying the same thing as you. So never be afraid to ask for help or suggestions. We're all here trying to accomplish the same thing. I think that's everything I have for y'all. I have some sources on the end if you guys want to read some fun stuff, and I'll be up here to answer any questions and talk about whatever you'd like.
Okay, some people say you put it in hydrogen peroxide, soak the seed. Is that good?
I don't like hydrogen peroxide. I know some people swear by it, but I personally just don't care for it. I worry that it opens up too many more wounds rather than helping out. So, personal preference.
Thank you.
When you do open germination and you're keeping the soil really moist, do you ever get issues with like fungus gnats or other insects that like this moisture?
My airflow is pretty abundant, so I don't get too many issues. But if you get a lot of fungus gnats and if you cover the soil with sand, they won't lay their eggs and they can't continue to reproduce in the sand. So that's an easy way to eliminate it. But I don't get too many issues unless I have a really low bad airflow area.
There's a question on Zoom. It's asking, can you please elaborate a little bit more about your soil mix?
Yeah, it's probably 70% peat moss, 30% perlite would probably be my seed mix, because I want my little seeds to grow in these fluffy little pillows. That's what I want them to sprout in. So that's my preferred media, but it's strictly for what type of waterer you are.
You can store it. You freeze it.
All seeds are stored in the refrigerator, yes, once they're cleaned. I don't do the freezer, but we've had fantastic results just in the fridge.
Which species of Copiapoa want the cold stratification?
I don't know exactly what species, but that was the only genre I found that sometimes needs it. So it would at least be worth looking into.
Yeah.
And what I've learned is cold stratification never hurts anything. So you can store your seeds in that, and a lot of times they'll sprout right there in the bag in the cold stratification if left too long. So never had any issues, but whatever you're storing it in, do your best. If you can make sure that's clean, that's for the better, but most of the time nothing grows bad anyway.
I have one more question, Mark. At what temperature should germination occur best at? Like room temperature?
For all species, cacti, I think
Cacti.
75, 85 is kind of my favorite temperature. I kind of keep everything around. Some of the ice plants may be a little lower, but I know that sometimes I get not over 90, I don't get the best germination.
So not outdoors in the summer.
Maybe not in the full sun. There's nothing wrong with like setting it outside and letting the warmth of the pot get there, but I definitely avoid that full sun. I don't just run it at full seed and right now.
There's another question on Zoom. Could you speak more about the stratification process, cold versus warm?
Sure. We've done a lot. It's actually really great. All it is taking sand or bank mud. Bank mud is what we use. It's essentially water lily soil. It holds a little more moisture, but all it is you're taking a media that has a very small amount of moisture in it, and you'll squeeze it out until it has a drop or two is all that's falling out of it. You put your seeds in it, mix it up evenly, close the bag, and put it in your refrigerator, because you're usually trying to store it for a cold stratification at 40 degrees, give or take. Some species will be very specific, but most of the time 40 degrees is fine. If you don't have sand or bank mud, perlite is an absolute perfectly fine substitute. Just sometimes it's hard to find the seeds in the perlite in the end. But we've had fantastic success. And the warm stratification it's kind of odd to be like, well, can't I just plant that then, right? It's warm stratification. I'm planting in a warm pot. It really is better to put that in a bag, set it on a shelf, and forget about it until it reaches those particular days. And I'm trying to make sure it's sitting at that exact temperature. So my greenhouses are staying 75, or if I need to stay even hotter, I can set it on a heating mat at the exact temperature I need. But usually it's just putting it on a shelf, forgetting about it for my warm stratification.
Are you just laying the seeds on the soil, or you?
They don't sit flat. We want to keep that soil even, tamp it even, and then just evenly placing them all on top. The rule of thumb with seeds across the board is you plant the seed twice the width. That's our rule of thumb almost for every seed. There's always exceptions, but that's a great one to always begin with.
I've done this a few times, and I get the seed or the little cactus rolling along really well. And about 3 or 4 months into it, they turn purple, and then the whole group dies. And I'm not sure what the main cause of that. I've done it 2 or 3 times. I mean, they start out amazing, and then they all wind up dying. What's the main reason?
It's probably just not, the acclimation was probably a little too fast, would be my guess on that. And either, when you opened them up and they got too much water, too dried out, during that. It's a lot of times that acclimation is a slow process that can take weeks. And a lot of times people just want to like pull it out and then they get too shocked and it's just not used to it. So a lot of times when it's starting purple, it's maybe stress as well. But the fungicides, that's a great way to like, you know, when you pull it out, to give yourself a little bit extra, a little security blanket sometimes. Because a lot of times you're going to dampen off or things like that.
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.